Joel Salatin, thank you so much for joining me today.
I want to see us have a food emancipation proclamation. Right now, our food system is shackled and enslaved.
When you think about yourself as a farmer, you're not just raising a chicken, you're raising an ecosystem. Isn't that right?
We are stewards of a niche of God's creation that is an unbelievably beautiful, complex, relationally oriented, and symbiotic.
What's happened to us? Do you think that the provisioning of food is impacting gut health?
What we're feeding our internal, village of microbiomes needs to be something that they are familiar with. And they don't understand Coca-Cola and Velveeta cheese.
I'm Nicole Shanahan. Welcome to Back to the People podcast, which highlights the growth of a movement uniting America, where our government is free from corporate capture and where we give voice back to the American public. Joel Salatin, thank you so much for joining me today on Back to the People podcast. You are one of the most popular leading regenerative farmers in the United States. You run Polyface Farms out of Virginia. And this was a farm I believe your father started. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Dad and Mom came here in 1961 when I was just 4 years old.
And I read here you were born in Venezuela. What's the story there?
I wasn't born in Venezuela, but I was there 6 weeks after I was born. So after World War II, Dad flew in the Navy. He wanted to have a farm, and he decided that he wanted to go to a developing country because he saw that as a more open, free market, cheaper land, more opportunity. And so he got on with Texas Oil Company as a bilingual accountant. He got it on the GI Bill, got his degree in business economics, and went with Texas Oil Company to Venezuela on the Wildcat Ventures there as a bilingual accountant. The Americans were managing, and then they used Venezuelans to do the heavy lifting, and so. And the tension was always about money, pay and the commissary and the company store and all that. And so they wanted these bilingual accountants. Well, it was a high paying job, and in 7 months, he was able to save enough money to buy a 1,000-acre farm in the highlands of Venezuela. Married mom, moved out there. They came back to the States to have us kids, just as this McCarthyism, Cold War, and they just didn't want to have a citizenship issue and weren't sure, when the next atomic bomb was going to go off. And so that's why they came back to have us. But we were there. And then in 1959 and 60, there was a junta, and we we were expats living out on the land, on the farm. uh, Dad had irritated the local farmers by having cleaner chickens and taking over the local chicken market from the other folks, so we were accused of voodoo and witchcraft. And when you have lawlessness like that and anarchy, it gives license to settle scores that wouldn't normally be settled under normal circumstances. And so it gave license for, other people to kind of chase us out because we'd taken their chicken market. And so we fled the back doors, and machine guns came in the front door,
Oh boy.
stayed for about another 9 months trying to get protection, could not get any movement at all. And so finally, the only thing to do was to come back. Dad was 39. He was there 12 years, loved the country, loved the people, loved the culture, um, and lost it all at 39. And we started over here in Virginia, Shenandoah Valley at that point. So there we are. That's how we ended up here.
Wow. So as a child, you had your first run in with politics in agriculture and seeing your family have to defend clean farming practices and getting criticized by the local community for doing things the right way. So this has been part of your life your whole life.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it does steep your we're steeped in this whatever maverickness. And when people ask me today, what's something you're really, really thankful for? At the top of my list up there is just the blessing of growing up in a family that embraced different. I mean, for dad and mom to go to Venezuela in, in 19 late 40s, 1950, that was certainly odd. And most people didn't do that, and especially to go there and then farm. I mean, if you went there and you were whatever, a corporate executive, and they needed Americans there, managing this American company. That was one thing, but to go there and actually farm was really crazy. And the way that development, the way the animosity developed was the indigenous chickens were unsanitary and unhygienic. They all had kind of a subtherapeutic nasal drip, kind of a subtherapeutic pneumonia. And so when people bought the chickens, I mean, this is 1950s, pre-refrigeration, I mean, this is Venezuela. So if a woman, if a senora, wanted to, serve chicken for dinner, she waited until the chicken, guy came by. You had the banana guy, the papaya guy, the pineapple guy, the coffee bean guy, the lentils guy, and here came the chicken guy, and she'd go out, and the chickens were live on a pole. They'd carry them. They tie their legs upside down, and they're carrying them along, and she'd go out, she'd run her finger down their beaks to see how wet their beak was, how much of this nasal drip there was, and the drier the beak, the more expensive, the better quality of the chicken. And so the vendors, the middlemen, were always looking for cleaner chickens because that's how they got their urban clients. Oh, I always get mine from Pedro. His chickens are cleaner, right? And so that's the way it was. And so when Dad came to market with these really clean chickens with dry beaks, quickly all these vendors would flock to his stand and buy all the chickens, and that angered the other farmers. And instead of asking us, well, how do you do that? They just thought we were using voodoo and witchcraft, and there we were. So
Wow. I feel like there's a lot of parallels to what's going on with agriculture in the United States today.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so today, so we move here and, we don't vaccinate, we don't medicate, we're using compost instead of chemical fertilizers. We're moving the animals around on the pasture instead of just leaving them in one field all the time. The chickens are outside where they, can get fresh air and sunshine and exercise. They're not locked up in a factory house. And so, now our chickens are gonna interact with the wildlife and then carry, bird flu back to the uh, houses. And so I've been called a bioterrorist and a typhoid Mary and a starvation advocate because we all know that, compost can't compete with chemicals. And so here we are, same boat crossing the same river, similar situations, which is why several years, many years ago, after one of these especially you know, difficult phone conversations. I got off, I told Teresa, my wife, I said, well, I can either be frustrated and depressed or I can just embrace it. And I think I'm just going to embrace it and have fun with it. So I'm going to be the lunatic farmer. Of course, I'm a lunatic. Come to the lunatic farmer. And it's become the best brand in the world. It's the greatest handle. I'm the only lunatic farmer in the world. So, so it's been fun. And that way I can just embrace it and enjoy it and not be in consternation about it all the time.
Yeah. Look, I think you just described the psychology of many of us common sense people who know the potential of what the science of soil promises for us and the science of nature promises for us if we interact with it correctly, we get more output of higher quality with less chemical inputs. But
Hmm.
for some reason, Joel, that equation does not make sense to well, let's see. What are we really up against? Well, we're kind of up against, these large industrial chicken factories
Hmm.
that have to vaccinate their stock, because if they don't, there will be these massive bird related illnesses that could potentially jump to humans. And so vaccination is, in those cases where these birds are not outside, they're inside in cages, they're overpopulated, they are fed things that chickens were never meant to be fed, and they get no vitamin D, no sunshine.
Right.
We have an agricultural system in place that treats all chicken growers the same, but the reality couldn't be different. How you raise a chicken compared to how these industrial farms are raising their chickens literally could not be more different. For all of the things that they're emphasizing in industrial chicken production are the opposite of what you're looking for. You're looking for the healthiest possible pasture raised hen. And what are the things that you're stewarding to get there? You're stewarding the soil, the grass, the microbial life. So when you think about yourself as a farmer, you're not just raising a chicken, you're raising an ecosystem. Isn't that right?
Thank you for for appreciating that. Yes, we are not chicken farmers. We are stewards of a niche of God's creation that is an unbelievably beautiful, complex, relationally oriented, and symbiotic. And one of the problems in mainline industrial agriculture today, I think, is a general kind of underlying, almost unspoken philosophy that nature's against us, and nature is a reluctant partner that I have to, you know, beat into submission and dominate, and I've got to, get it in a half Nelson, and I'm gonna make you grow me chickens or apples or whatever it is, in some sort of a very uh, wrestling contested kind of relationship.
Sounds very antagonistic.
Yeah, very antagonistic. We believe on the completely opposite. That nature is a benevolent lover, that God's designed a nature of abundance, and it's just like a benevolent lover that simply wants to be caressed in the right places. And if we caress in the right places, it will generate, abundance beyond our capacity to imagine. Abundance not only, immeasurable production, but abundance in immunological function, abundance in, um, uh, in just synergistic, togetherness, working with us, all of those kinds of things, everything that is entailed in that kind of benevolent relationship, and so it's a very different different mindset.
I mean, let's just talk about gut health. The amount of probiotics and prebiotics people are now taking because their doctors are advising it because they have these messed up digestive systems. Um, Pretty much, everybody I know has some kind of weird GI thing they're dealing with. More and more people are treating it with, these carnivore style diets. I mean, the number of gut reset, gut protocol, gut this, gut that, you go to the probiotic section at the grocery store, it is truly overwhelming.
Yeah.
And what's happened to us? Have humans always been like this, or is there something fundamental that you think, as a purveyor of things that go in people's guts, do you think that the provisioning of food is impacting gut health? And it's not just that all spinach is made equal or all beef is made equal, because that's not the case, right? So like, in your opinion, as someone who understands microbial life in the provisioning of food that ends up in our guts, what do you think's happening?
I think there's a couple of things going on, and again, I really appreciate the question. One is that we are routinely ingesting things that are foreign to our microbiome. If you can't pronounce it and you can't make it in your kitchen, that is a foreign object, and I'm not xenophobe. I'm not. Don't write into this any more than I'm discussing. Okay, uh, uh, but our microbiome, I call our microbiome those microbes, which are billions and billions and billions, um, are second cousins or maybe first cousins to the biome in the soil, to the biota in the soil. In fact, if you look at human skin and you look at soil, and you do like a cutaway side profile. I've seen these in like science textbooks and stuff. They almost look identical. They have very similar properties, and they're both skin. One's the skin of the earth, one's the skin of me, and and so what we're feeding our internal village of microbiomes needs to be something that they are familiar with, that they understand. And they don't understand Coca-Cola and Velveeta cheese, squeezable cheese and sterile, okay? Our our whole, food choices, our sustenance is becoming more and more sterile to the inclusion of life. Well, life isn't sterile. It's hard to create sterility. And so here we are ingesting sterile things that don't have a microbial community. People that know me know that I routinely drink out of the stock tank with the cows. The cows are drinking out of one side, I go and drink out of the other side. And what I'm feeding my microbiome. I'm actually wanting that level of diversity. Finland leads the world in its testing of farm kids who, toddlers, everything goes in your mouth, right? You feel with your fingers and everything goes in your mouth. So these farm kids are, they're eating bits of straw and some manure and, different things compared to city kids who are living this antimicrobial sterile environment. And the immunological functionality is light years different between those two groups, which has led many doctors have signed on to the hygiene hypothesis, which is that our immune system is actually like a big muscle, and this big muscle needs to be exercised with routine disturbance, some cuts and splinters, and some bruises, and a little bit of dirt, and some some exterior air, and some these kinds of things. And I mean, this was part of Guns, Germs, and Steel, right? The New York Times bestseller that talked about which civilizations maintained ascendancy, and part of it was germs, and the ones that had livestock, that lived in proximity to livestock. In Switzerland, where the people lived up here and the cows were underneath. People lived literally in the second story of the barn. Those became the most robust civilizations immunologically compared to the civilizations that just hunted and had wild animals without without proximity to livestock. And so we see those kinds of things over and over. And so I like to think of our mouth kind of as a gateway. So our mouth is a gateway to our internal community. So we've got an external community of microbes, we've got an internal community of microbes, and between the two is our mouth. That's a gateway. And so everything that our microbiome knows about the world, about the world out there, is coming through our through our mouth, through our gateway. And I would suggest, so what does my microbe know? What do they think about this world out here? Is this a world of abuse to life, of disrespecting, of violence, of militaristic, antagonistic action? Or is it a world of, peaceful abundance and happiness? And one of the things that we've learned over the many years, especially from our gourmet chefs, is that all of our meats cook about 15 to 20% faster than regular conventional factory farm stuff. And we said, well, why would that be? Why could that be? And the only thing we can come up with doing a lot of sleuthing and thinking and talking to people that are smarter than I am, is that our animals don't secrete adrenaline. Adrenaline tightens you up. That's how 100-pound mom can pick up a car off her 2-year-old toddler if it falls off a jack, and and so. Uh, the animals, most of the animals, livestock in the U.S. uh, live in very stressful environments where their whole life they're drip, 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 dripping adrenaline, which tightens everything up. Our animals are happy. They never secrete adrenaline. And so they come in relaxed. And so I dare to ask the question, can we eat happiness? And I think we can eat happiness, or we can eat stress and violence. And that is the world that our microbiome knows.
Interesting. Yeah, it's I saw this video of this mechanical baby chick vaccination um machine, and it was picking up these baby chicks that look like, I don't know, they're a few weeks old, maybe 2 or 3 weeks old. They were being held by this mechanical arm, shoved into this space, and then injected in their back with a vaccine. And it just seemed horrific. It seemed like something out of a nightmare, honestly.
A sci-fi carrot thing.
Yeah, and like, to be so disconnected with our food now that we're injecting these foreign substances into baby chicks during their development, and then those baby chicks are going to spend the majority of their lives in confinement, in really these dirty, confined environments, and then they'll be slaughtered probably through some terrifying experience, and then fed to a child who's also going through something similar. And not that they're being mechanically vaccinated, but these children are being very highly vaccinated, more so than you were as a child, and more so than I was a child. I mean, how could we not be a sick civilization if that is how we are living?
Well, that's right, and I think one of the things that you're hitting on here is the basic, you know, philosophical difference between my view of life and the industrial view of life. The industrial view of life is that life is fundamentally mechanical. It is fundamentally it's like, in other words, they would say a cow is more like a car, than, anything else. I look at this and say, no, life is not mechanical. It is fundamentally biological. And there is a huge difference between mechanical and biological things. Now, there are mechanical aspects of living things. I mean, the physics of, leverage and bones and arms and structure. There is some similarity, but the differences are pronounced so magnificently in that living things can adapt, they have a dynamism, they have a response dynamism, and they can react. You can go out and hug your car all day, and it doesn't blink at you, it doesn't care, there's no emotion there at all. You go out and you hug a chicken or hug a cow or hug a tomato plant, for crying out loud. An actual, response there. There is a spark of recognition and dynamism there, that doesn't happen with mechanics. And so what we have right now is an industrial agriculture system that views life from a mechanical standpoint. So it's just parts. We can put this part in, take this part out, rearrange this part over here, and it's not looked at as if a whole. I mean, right now, the perfect example is this bird flu policy where we kill the survivors. I mean, Dr. Zach Bush talks about this eloquently, probably is better than anybody I know. He talks about we are literally a swirl, a swirl of cosmic life responding, adapting. I think about Star Wars, in that cafe, when Luke Skywalker walks in there and he needs a fast ship, and he finds Han Solo, and over there in the corner there's this band. They got these two-headed things. And I imagine that this whole alien beings, life force around us, and it's adapting and talking and corresponding. And well, I'll trade you some molybdenum for that polysaccharide. This is going on in the globulin of the actinomycetes in the root hairs of the plants. It's happening in the fungi. It's happening in our microbiome. So you have this virus. The virus wants to become more virulent. The virus is adapting, and the virus is wanting to survive and become more aggressive. And you've got the chicken over here, and the chicken is adapting and trying to throw off the virus and become more immunologically functional. Well, here we come with the USDA policy. We've got a flock of 2,000 chickens, and bird flu comes in, and 1,500 of them die, and 500 of them are not sick at all. And our policy is, well, we got to kill those survivors because they were proximate to the ones that were sick. Well, Nicole, those 500 survivors are the ones that, whether they had it and got over it or whether they didn't get it at all, but they are the ones that are adapting to this virus. We deny now the entire poultry industry the chance of the chicken to be able to adapt along with the virus. Now we let the virus adapt, and we take the ones that adapted to the virus and we kill them. It's insanity.
It's the opposite of Darwinianism. It's slaughter of the fittest.
Yes, yes, it is. It's not scientific, it's not reasonable, and intuitively we understand that it doesn't make any sense. But that's exactly what we're doing, and I just can't can't wrap my head around uh, why, if you have a sickness going through, the one thing you do not want to kill is the survivors. You want to breed them and breed more flourishing immunological function into the subsequent generations.
It's almost like they want our chickens to be sick and weak to make the argument that they must be vaccinated or handled in these very heavy-handed industrial ways. And I've always found that very confusing, is that we now have a culture of doing these necessary evils. We know that pasture raised chickens have better immune systems, but yet our entire agricultural system is around these necessary evils of large scale factory production with lots of diseases that then have to be chemically managed through antibiotics, which we know are bad for our gut. Yeah, thankfully, we have an FDA commissioner who understands that now. But, for a long time, we kind of just didn't think much of it. The massive use of antibiotics in humans and our food, and especially our fowl, has been it's just wild how many inputs go into these factory farms. Um, and it's oftentimes, we can make the argument for why it's bad, but even if we win that argument, we lose on the argument that it is a quote necessary evil to get our American food production where it needs to be to feed the mouths of Americans. What is your comment on that?
The overall question is, well, compost and pastured chickens and grass finished beef, well, that's all cute and warm and fuzzy, and it's pretty to take pictures of and, put in little, gourmet, um, food magazines, but it can't actually feed the world. And nothing could be further from the truth. Not only can it feed the world, it's the only system that actually can feed the world. So you have to understand I think the short history here. When Justice von Liebig in 1837 told the world that all of life is simply a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, NPK, and launched the chemical fertilization concept on the planet, that got a lot of help in World War I and World War II because NPK is what you make bombs out of, ammunition, explosives. And so the war effort financed the mining, branding, marketing, refining, development of synthetic NPK for ammunition and for the war effort. The two wars also had a lot of effect in America's farmland in that a lot of farm boys got killed or injured and didn't come back to the farm. And so here's dad out here shoveling, 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 and he's presented with this little bag of little pellets, and they say, "You don't have to shovel anymore, Farmer Joe. All you have to do is put this on, and you can grow crops." Um, Chances are we might have reached for that bag too. So be gentle on grandpa. I'm serious about it. You know, be gentle on grandpa. But there was during this period of time from 1920 to 1940, there was a famous Britisher. Well, he's famous in my circles at least, a guy named Sir Albert Howard, who spent his lifetime in India, um, learning about aerobic composting and brought that to the world in 1943 with an agricultural testament. And he explained to the world the five ingredient recipe of aerobic composting. But the world was embroiled in a kind of a big conflagration in 1943 called World War II. And so here we come to post, World War II, and the war is over. We're at 1945, 46, and we've got two two possibilities confronting the American farmer who has probably lost a son or two in the war. You can either continue to shovel and shovel and shovel and shovel and make compost, or you can use this little bag of pellets and you can grow crops. They were tired of shoveling. Dad was now 50, 60 years old. He's done of shoveling. And so it took 20 years from basically 45 to 65, basically 20 years to develop the chainsaw, water piping, manure spreaders, front end loaders, and all the essential technological, apparatus to be able to efficiently run a carbon economy on the farm, a true in situ biomass generated carbon economy. But in those 20 years, the chemical companies and that approach to feed the world, that approach dominated our land grant universities, our USDA, our food system, our food pyramids. We got, you know, um, we got TV dinners. We got the industrialization and convenience oriented. And so by the time the carbon part of the equation got competitive, economically and labor and convenience, the other side had already taken over the system. The truth is, Nicole, if we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico.
American ranchers steward our land. Buying 100% U.S. born, pasture raised, and processed meat supports American ranchers and American farmland. That's why I'm glad to partner with Backyard Butchers. Backyard Butchers is delivering quality meat directly from the ranch to your doorstep. All backyard butchered beef is certified pasture raised. This means animals are never confined to a feedlot and are able to roam freely and behave naturally on pastures. This roaming can function as a natural fertilizer and benefits soil and water health. It also tastes delicious. Backyard butchers' meat comes straight from Texas ranchers where they know the actual rancher and how the meat was raised and processed. They have beef tallow for your skin or your french fries. Check out the Steakhouse box. It's got T-bones, fillets, incredible burgers, and more. There's something every member of the family will love. Backyard Butchers is good, fresh meat raised in Texas the right way. Go to backyardbutchers.com/Nicole and use code Nicole for 20% off. That's backyardbutchers.com/Nicole, code Nicole for 20% off. Yes, we can feed the world using clean agricultural practices. This is not a necessary evil to go poison ourselves and our food and our whole food supply chain in order to produce enough food to feed the public. But do you think we are too far gone now to correct for this? Because, and I'm playing devil's advocate here because I've been in these arguments with people and they're like, that may have been true in 1950. It may have been even true in 1960 that we could have reversed the course that we are on. And this is there's a lot of parallels to the arguments in the climate space as well. They're like, we're too far gone for planting trees. Therefore, now we have to chemically induce weather modification, right? And and so the argument that our agricultural system is, quote, too far gone that we now have to chemically induce food production forever. How would you respond to that?
My quick response is, of course we're not. One of the beauties of biological systems is that they're unbelievably healing oriented. I mean, that's one of the big difference between mechanical and biological systems. Mechanical, if your bearing goes out in your car, you can rest your car, you can apologize to it, you you can even put extra grease on it, but that bearing is not going to heal. You got to put a new bearing in. But in life, we can do abusive things, we can hurt things, things can be injured, and they can heal. And boy, aren't we glad of that? I mean, you can even say an unfit word to your spouse and apologize and forgiveness, and it can heal. Aren't we glad of that? And so in life, we see this wonderful umbrella of protection and healing capacity. Listen, Nicole, on our farm, when we came here in 1961, this farm had been plowed and planted in corn and crops for almost 200 years, had lost between 3 and 5 feet of topsoil. We had gullies. The deepest one we measured was 16 feet deep, 16-foot deep gully. We had fields that were nothing but rock. Not all of them, but there were big kind of saucer shaped areas in our fields that were nothing but rock. I mean, there was no soil, no nothing, no weeds, no grass. It was just rock. Today, today, here in my lifetime, all of these rocks now have 14 to 16 inches of soil on them. Now it's not 3 feet like it was 500 years ago, but they're covered up with soil. And we didn't haul soil in. We grew that soil over time, looking at nature's patterns. 500 years ago, the North America produced more food than it does today. 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. Now, it wasn't all eaten by humans. There were, a couple hundred million bison. There, there was more weight of bison 500 years ago than there are cows today. Clearly, burps and farts aren't going to destroy the planet. But the bison were not handled the way cattle are handled today. They weren't fed corn. They weren't put in feedlots. Their feed was not generated by chemical fertilizer. Okay, we had 200 million beavers that ate more vegetable material than all the humans in North America today. We had bird populations. I mean, Audubon sat under a tree. He recorded in his diary, he said, I couldn't see the sun for 3 days for the flock of passenger pigeons that flew over and blocked out the sun for 3 days. Who has seen the sun blocked out by birds for 3 days? This is before Tyson, Purdue, Pilgrim's Pride, and Cargill came along. It's important for us to remember that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. and we were 8% water. Today we're under 4% water. Then we were 8% because of all the beaver ponds, and we still produced all of this food. So from a hydration standpoint, evapotranspiration, rain development, vegetation, all of that, we pride ourselves on our John Deere, our chemical farming, our factory farms, and our antibiotics and all this stuff. But actually, we have not achieved the abundance of 500 years ago. And so that gives me pause. It gives me pause to, in my hubris that, wow, look how smart I am. But it also gives me great hope, Nicole, that nature is abundantly um, able, resilient, able to compensate for a lot of abuse, and that is ultimately hopeful.
When you talk about aerobic composting, you're not talking about the fact that like humans are doing aerobic exercise to make the compost, right? Like it's not like the shoveling, it's not like the activity of composting is like aerobically exercising for the human. You're actually talking about some other process. Let's share with the world what aerobic composting is.
Yeah, there's a couple of different kinds of decomposition. One is anaerobic and one is aerobic. So we're all familiar with anaerobic fermentation, wine, kimchi, sauerkraut. Okay,
How does that work? I mean, like, I understand the concept of it, but, like, if you can break it down for us, what is anaerobic versus aerobic microbial activity?
anaerobic, of course, is without oxygen. It's so you either with water or with a plug, some sort of a lid, you exclude oxygen, and the microbes, you um, go into a non-oxygenated system, and that's a different. It's like salt water and fresh water, two different kinds of microbes. All right, aerobic microbes, which live in the top 6 inches of soil, anaerobic live under 6 inches of soil. Um, they operate completely differently, and so the soil, the living soil that you and I think about when we go out and we, plant some flowers or plant some garden, that is all aerobic. And if you dump anaerobic microbes on it, it's as toxic as salt water being dumped on fresh water, all right? Anaerobic creates formaldehydes and preservatives. That's why I use it in sauerkraut and kimchi and wine, okay?
Yeah.
It is because
It's
it's a
like a
preser
gas. It's producing a gas,
yeah, yeah,
basically.
it's a preservative function, okay? Aerobic is with oxygen, totally different set of microbes, and it's a decomposition process that requires oxygen. When a tree falls in the woods and decomposes, that is aerobic decomposition.
Are those microbes taking in oxygen and converting them to something else, or how does oxygen play into those microbes?
Oh boy, you're getting a little more technical than I know here, Nicole. I don't. All I know is that when Sir Albert Howard developed his recipe for composting, there were 5 ingredients. Here they are, 5 ingredients: carbon, and they all had to be balanced. Okay, carbon, nitrogen, um, oxygen, water, H2O, and microbes. Okay, and those all had to be balanced. Now, in an anaerobic situation, like in a cow gut. She eats, biomass material, and in her anaerobic decomposition, which basically she's a fermentation tank. Um, she is decomposing this stuff in 24 hours. I look at a cow as that's like a compost pile on steroids, a race car compost pile. So that works there and generates a tremendous, manure and urine, which is a wonderful fertilizer capacity. But aerobic composting is the way things, leaves decompose in the forest, the grass decomposes in the soil. All these things are they're aerobic, and of course, the top part of the soil is aerobic. So what we want is we want those aerobic microbes to proliferate, and so in the compost, um, we we have to aerate it in order for it to actually run. So the compost isn't moving, but we have to move it to get the oxygen into it.
There is a human aerobic side to it.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and now, of course, when we do this commercially, on a huge scale, obviously we use front end loaders and things like that. On our farm, what we use are pigs. We call them piggerators, and so when the cows are eating hay, and we use what we call a carbonaceous diaper underneath them, a carbon that absorbs the manure and urine and locks it up molecularly, so it doesn't vaporize and it doesn't leach into the groundwater. And we add corn to it. The cows are heavy; they're tromping out the oxygen, so it's actually like a big sauerkraut, tank. And the corn is in there fermenting. The cows come out. The grass begins to grow in the spring. We put the cows back out. We put in the pigs. The pigs then seek the fermented corn and turn it up like a big egg beater and inject the oxygen and convert it from anaerobic to aerobic. Because if we spread anaerobic material on the fields, it will kill the grass because it's anaerobic microbes and the formaldehydes and the pickling onto the aerobic soil. And so we need to convert that from anaerobic over to aerobic, and then we can spread it on the fields, and it makes grass grow and feeds the microbes, and all is well on planet Earth.
That's amazing. I've never heard of pigs. What do you call them?
We call them piggerators because they're
Piggerators.
aerating. Yeah, they're aerating. 'Cause look, Nicole, you're probably familiar with windrow compost piles. Where they run a compost turner through it and it turns it and keeps the oxygen right. Well, instead of using equipment to do that, we use pigs to do that, and that way we don't have to use petroleum and machinery and labor. And the pigs, of course, love to do this. It fully respects and honors the pigs. So now the pigs are not just pork chops and bacon, they are co laborers in this great land healing ministry. So it changes the spiritual and emotional relationship we have with the pigs.
Land healing ministry. I love the sound of that.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Um, how do you get the pigs sorry, this is now just my own personal curiosity. They must love that job so much. How do you get them to kinda move on when you gotta, because you don't keep them there indefinitely, right? Like, you've probably gotta get them to a different pen afterwards, but they probably don't wanna leave their job.
Well, they leave when their fermented corn runs out. So
Oh.
so imagine this strata. This carbonaceous diaper is, let's just say, it's 3 feet deep. Okay, 3 feet deep. We put in 80 pounds of corn per cubic yard of material. That ferments in there. The pigs come in and they start churning it up. And of course, the pigs aren't stupid. They do the top 12 inches. Well, oh, now I'm hungry. I got to find more corn. So now they go deeper than 12 and they go down to 24 inches. So they're turning it again, and it turns again and again and again. And when the pigs, when they run out, when they get to the bottom and they run out of the fermented grain, then we take them other places. We take them to pastures we have in the woods and silvo pastures and different things. So this is just a roughly a 6 to 8 week composting process we use every spring, as a key component, a foundational to our entire fertility program. So our agronomically, our soil fertility program is an in situ carbon developed program. So when Putin invades Ukraine and fertilizer jumps 400%, and all the farmers are, oh no, what am I going to do? Farm fertilizer's gone up 400%. It didn't affect us at all because we don't buy any of the stuff. And if you look at nature's patterns, you look anywhere on the planet at nature's patterns. Nature doesn't move carbon very far. Leaves fall from the tree, grass falls over where it is. Herbivores poop not too far from where they ate, the grass. All right. Giraffes, yeah, they might migrate, but they don't migrate, thousands of miles from the acacia tree that they ate the leaves from. And so nature, even a bird that's eating, seeds and worms, they don't go that far from where they ate. They go to a tree, they perch, they poop there. In other words, the order of nature is that solar energy, the sun, drives vegetative growth through photosynthesis. That vegetative growth either fertilizes itself or it's consumed by an animal, and that creates fertilizer in situ. This planet was not created so that our farm in Virginia would be dependent on petroleum from Saudi Arabia and phosphorus from Morocco and natural gas from Russia. The pattern is that it is a self-contained, self-reliant program that that through symbiosis and and um, and digestion, it works on site on its own. So if we actually had an agriculture like this, imagine imagine taking all the trees that burn in forest fires, how many acres? And instead of watching them burn, if instead we went in and we harvested those vulnerable trees and we used the biomass for composting, we wouldn't need 1 ounce of chemical fertilizer in the entire country, and we could create an entire vocational legacy of people that are biomass stewards, chipping and harvesting and running on solar energy, running our farms, our agriculture. We would be growing soil, growing earthworms, feeding the soil microbiology to grow abundance, and suddenly thousands of people could come home from work, and their kids could say, "Well, mommy, daddy, what did you do?" "Oh, we stewarded we took junk trees, dead trees, we turned them into chips so they could be compost, so they could build soil and grow earthworms, so that when you get to our age, there will be more abundance, more food, and more soil than our generation had." And
I
if
love
that
that.
isn't a noble, righteous, sacred ministry, I don't know what is.
I have to tell you, Joel, in my lifetime of work, the one area of my work that has consistently proven to be good, that to add no harm, to do no evil, and result in a net good has been regenerative farming.
Mm,
I was lucky enough to meet some great farmers through the Kiss the Ground network.
right.
And it is the only work I do that consistently lifts up my spirit, makes me feel proud of myself, and has no downside. Like,
Right.
there's no dark side to regenerative farming that I have encountered, like, the practice of it itself, and it has been just you're right, it's like it's abundance on top of abundance, both spiritual, physical, mental, emotional. It's so healing, and it's ubiquitous across nations. I've met regenerative farmers in El Salvador now, and
Mhm.
it's the same vibe of a regenerative farm I've been in here in California, and it's so life-giving and life-enforcing. And then it's like I really see no downside to it, but yet the more farmers I talk to, it's like it seems like there's this crushing energy that's almost like metaphysical, trying to put an end to this goodness. And we see it kind of coming from multiple angles, and I wanted to ask you, what are the angles that are most pressing for you on your farm? But some of the things I'm hearing right now is the endless fees of having to report to the state and federal FDAs and regulatory bodies. There's so many regulatory bodies, and each has its own, different testing requirements, reporting requirements, and farmers have to pay for all of these things. They're just constantly cutting check after check after check, and they're having to buy the tests themselves. The government doesn't provide those tests. One example is a dairy here in California I was just talking to that said that they have to test for antibiotic residues in their milk, but they're a fully closed vertical system. So they're just, selling milk from their own cows. It's not like they're mixing milk as the factory dairies are doing. And but they're subjected to the same requirements, the same factory requirements as the big factory farms, but their production is so vastly different and so much cleaner. And so just the financial burden is really crushing a lot of people. The farm credit system I've been hearing, it's a huge scheme that has like really been used to attack certain family farms and go after family farms. um, Land access. Farmers are getting kicked off of farmland their family has leased for years. I mean, I could go on and on and on, from the vaccine requirements to the tagging and reporting requirements. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it just I don't know how the family farm survives this generation of harassment. I mean, this is so much harassment. It's crushing. It's crushing just to talk about it.
Yes, it is, it is. In fact, I think I'm the editor of Stockman Grass Farmer magazine, and I think I've actually, um, yeah, I have to write an editorial every month, and I think my next one is gonna be farmer traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
I think that, the difference between, post-traumatic stress disorder, we think about with the military, is that at least they get to leave their it's post-traumatic, they had trauma and now they've left it, but a farm,
It's like
it
persecution.
it's every day. It's another document to sign, it's another license, and so, fortunately, I don't deal with very much of that because as much as a lot of people, because we are completely outside the system, and we don't participate. I mean, these you know uh, compliance requirements are primarily, if you when you go into the system, then you have all this. But if you stay completely outside the system, it's not quite so bad. What is bad when you're completely outside the system is that then you run up against all the food safety requirements, and all these regulations. I mean, you mentioned the dairy farm, you mentioned farm credit. All of these systems are designed to be scale prejudicial. In other words, if you're big, it's easier to comply than if you're small, because the paperwork is the same whether you're a million or whether you're 1,000, of whatever it is, bushels of apples, pounds of milk, pounds of pork, whatever. And because the compliance and licensing testing requirements are the same, it puts an inordinate burden on the smaller producers who don't have as many pounds or bushels or baskets to 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 pay for that overhead of compliance. And so they become extremely scale prejudicial. And I suggest that any law that is scale prejudicial, in other words, that's easier to comply with if you're big than if you're small, is an inherently unjust and unfair regulatory burden, because it inherently tends to exclude prototypes, creativity, new people entering the marketplace. And this is why whenever anybody asks me, if you were a king for a day, what would you do? I'm a one string banjo. I'm sorry, I don't have. I mean, you mentioned all of this stuff, and yeah, I could talk about all that. But I'm a one string banjo. I want to see us have a food emancipation proclamation. Right now, our food system is shackled and enslaved to a regulatory interventionist system that keeps neighbors from being able to interact in food transactions with each other without a government agent involved. Let's say that you made a fantastic chicken pot pie, and I knew you. We were neighbors, literally neighbors. Okay, we're not proximate, but let's say we were literally proximate neighbors. And I knew that you made the world's best chicken pot pie from your pastured chickens. And I came over and said, Nicole, would I've got guests coming next week. I don't have time to fix a special meal for them. Could you fix about three chicken pot pies for me? I'll buy them from you and have them for my guests. It's illegal for us to engage in that transaction because you don't have a commercial inspected, licensed, a commercial kitchen, and you don't have a HACCP plan, hazardous analysis critical control point, and blah blah blah. Okay, and I suggest that we have to free up an option for two of us, you and I, as consenting adults, exercising our freedom of choice to be able to engage in a neighbor to neighbor food transaction without a government agent being involved.
Mhm.
I'm not suggesting that you'd be able to, send your pot pies to Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or export them or even sell them to Walmart, okay? But I am suggesting that if we know each other and we allow our relationship to be the vetting agent in our provenance rather than a bureaucratic check sheet, there has to be some aspect of our food system that does not require a government agent being involved. See, you can give me the pot pie. That's perfectly legal, and I can feed it to my guests and my children. You just can't sell it to me. And that shows the hypocrisy of these food regulations that only preclude the sale. They don't preclude me from buying it. They don't preclude you from giving it away. All they preclude is you to sell it. Other hazardous things like fentanyl, methamphetamine, prescription drugs, the prohibitions are on both buyer and seller and even the user. You can't even use it. But on food, the prohibition is not on the buyer, it's not on the user, it's only on the seller. And the seller can even give it away if they want to give it away. The problem is, Nicole, we've got freedom of choice. I mean, we love to talk about choice in our country. We've got choice in the bedroom, choice in the bathroom, choice in the womb. We don't have choice in the kitchen. And that needs to be fixed so that we can unleash a horde, a tsunami of small entrepreneurial, artisanal craft food and farming producers on the marketplace to chip away at the oligarchy where we have four companies controlling 85% of the meat supply in America. Four companies control 85% of the meat supply. That's an oligarchy. And the answer is not antitrust regulations. It's not sending, Federal the Trade Commission against them. The answer is not top down from the government. The answer is bottom up, solving it with liberty and freedom.
Well said, Joel. Last question for you. There was a lot of kerfuffle around the selection of the new leadership at the USDA during the transition season, welcoming in this new administration. And we know that, for instance, Big Pharma was involved in trying to take down Bobby Kennedy from going into HHS. Do you think that big food played a role through lobbying to keep regenerative agriculture out?
Oh, no. No question. That's an easy question. Absolutely. Listen, industrial ag, Monsanto and company, Tyson, whatever, uh, they abhor people like me. They abhor anyone who is not dependent on their chemicals, their pharmaceuticals, their infrastructure, their chains of their food chain. Their marketing clients, and so they abhor competition, and they want to use the government to keep to keep the food and farming sector shackled to the slavery dependence. And I know I'm using strong words, but it's time to use strong words. I'm tired of mamby-pamby timid around. No, we've got to fight for our country. We've got to fight for our kids. We've got to fight for options. And the fact that SNAP, I mean, Bobby Kennedy has now, I mean, who knew even 2 months ago until he said it, who knew that SNAP spends $10 billion a year on soda, on high fructose, Coca-Cola and Dr. Pepper, Mountain Dew soft
Yep.
drinks.
Straight into the hands of those
Yeah,
companies.
I
Mhm.
didn't know that, and I feel myself I'm fairly, up on these things. I mean, I knew it was a lot, but I certainly didn't know it was 1/10 of the entire SNAP budget is a direct payment directly to those big, drink companies, and so my concern from day one when I saw, the Bobby Kennedy was going in as the nominee, my concern immediately turned to the USDA, and my concern was that the farm sector will sabotage the food sector. In the big scheme of things, that whatever can be done at the food end of it will be sabotaged by the farm end of it. And I'm concerned that that's where we're headed, and I hope I'm you don't know how much I hope I'm wrong, but, the way I've seen this, I mean, the fact that this bird flu, we've killed probably 165 million
Millions,
non-sick
Jesus.
birds. Maybe a
Mhm.
million of them have been sick, but most of them have not been. And is it a thing? Yes. I'm not a bird flu denier. It's a thing. It's a thing. But, we need to quit killing the survivors, and we need to test. I mean, the USDA won't even test hypochlorous, CDS, homeopathic. I mean, there are several remedies that have now come to the fore that seem to have extremely good efficacy as a remedy, but the USDA won't even test them. And so who's really in charge? Is it the pharmaceutical companies? I'll tell you this, for me, what this whole bird flu thing has shown me is, I mean, I always knew the pharmaceutical companies were powerful, but this has just shown to me just how much power there is. I mean, look, they're the number one advertiser on TV. They own the media. They're the number one you know, political campaign contributor. So they own the politicians. They're the number one seed money for land grant research dollars to get anti-science agenda-driven studies done, and they own the hospital and healthcare industry. You add those 4 things up, the media, the politicians, the land grant university research arms, and health and hospitals, that
It's
is
like
a lot
most of
of ownership.
society.
It
It's
is,
like
it is.
all
It's
corners
a it's a
of our
lot of ownership,
civilization.
and
Yeah.
how do we turn that around? I don't and if you dare to even question a vaccine protocol, if you dare to even question this, you're censored, deplatformed, you're a
Yep.
misinformation, uh, unspeakable, hate
Must be,
monger.
yeah. Yeah, and then canceled. Well, Joel, thank you so much for, educating us. I learned quite a bit during this podcast. I hope our listeners have as well. Where can people follow you, Joel, and learn more?
Yeah, so I'm a Luddite. I don't have a personal social media presence. Everything that I have is through our farm, Polyface Farms, Polyface, Polyface Farms. I do a blog. I do a weekly podcast as well. It's all on there, and I travel a lot, speak a lot. I'm glad to, visit with people. We do a lot of events and things here on the farm, and we invite anybody to come to the farm. We have a 24/7, 365 open door policy here at the farm for anyone to come at any time from anywhere in the world to see anything unannounced without asking. And that's our commitment to transparency.
And what season is the pigerator? Did I say that right?
Yeah, the Piggerator, so they're out there right now, and they will be done. Let's see, we're at the end of March. They will be done by the end of April. So it's a very narrow time period.
It sounds very exciting time there on the farm. Well, thank you again for everything you do.